Floyd.
Yeah, joining us now is the senior pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, Reverend Warnock. And Reverend Warnock, emotions are running high nationwide. What is your reaction to what's happening right here in Atlanta?
Thank you so very much. It's good to be with you. You know, I am a father of two very small children, and I've got a whole host of nieces and nephews. So when I see the young people on the streets, my heart is with them. I feel their pain. I'm concerned about their safety. But I don't want us to begin to think of this as the crisis. The fact that young people are on the street is not the crisis. This is a response to a slow-rolling crisis that we've been dealing with in this country for several decades now. We have built by far the most massive prison infrastructure there is in the world. We warehouse 25% of the world's prisoners. We've made a set of public policy decisions as a country that has sewn us up into a bag, and now we're seeing the consequences of that spill over into the street. This is even bigger than police brutality. If you build a massive carceral state, a monstrosity of a beast of the size and magnitude that we've built over the last 40 years, that beast has to be fed. Let's face it, there are incomes, actually, there are livelihoods at stake. And so until we get serious about restructuring and reprioritizing and reinvesting on the front end rather than building on the back end, we're going to find ourselves here over and over again.
Reverend, we should mention that you're running for U.S. Senate. What would you say to all the young black boys and black men out there who are tired and weary and worn over being judged by their skin color first?
I'm one with them, and I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to be profiled as a teenager in a grocery store for walking around with my hands in my pocket and to be stopped and frisked, and when discovered not to be shoplifting, not even to receive an apology. I know that humiliation and that pain. I pressed through it as a young person growing up in public housing down in Savannah, Georgia, and somehow was able to go on and get a college degree and a PhD degree and become the pastor of Ebenezer Church. I'm running because I'm concerned about these young people. I'm running because it's harder for them to get where I am than it was for me growing up in poverty over 30 years ago. And so we'll get through this, as tough as it is. At some point, you know, we'll get through this kind of conflagration that we're going through in this moment. But until we reinvest in our children, because they're all of our children, we're going to find ourselves here again. And the infrastructure we built is what has created this ideology and consciousness in our culture, not just police culture, that sees black bodies in general and black young men in particular as dangerous. That's why the CNN reporter, Omar Jimenez, who's a member of my church, that's why he could be arrested while reporting live on television for CNN. Yeah. I mean, think about the absurdity of it all. We're in a place where the skin that he was wearing was much more consequential than the badge that he was wearing. And that's deeply problematic for all of us. All of us.
Pastor Warnock, so where do we go? Where do we go from here? You talked about your frustrations. We're hearing it from our young people. How do we reach them, and where do we take this thing?
We got to sit down, and they know when we're listening. And we need to create some conversations right here in Atlanta. After all, we're the cradle of the civil rights movement. We know how to facilitate change in Atlanta. This is the hometown of Martin Luther King Jr., who was nurtured and born on Auburn Avenue, grew up in my church. We need to have some honest conversations about what we're dealing with here. And, you know, I'm grateful to see that this is one of the areas in politics that there is some agreement on both sides of the aisle that this massive prison infrastructure that I'm talking about is unsustainable. It's the one place Democrats and Republicans agree that there needs to be reform. They've come to that conclusion for different reasons. It doesn't matter much to me why people come to the conclusion when it comes to trying to get something done. But I think Atlanta ought to be the place where, and Georgia ought to be the place where we get this going. We've had some changes in this state but we still have people on probation way too long in this state. In some ways, we're still ground zero for the prison industrial complex. Last summer, I convened religious leaders across faith traditions in a multiracial conference at my church dealing with this. And we began to deal with the whole issue around bail reform, the fact that we've got poor people in jail, not because they're dangerous, not because they've been convicted of anything. A lot of them are just sitting there warehoused waiting to go to trial. And the only thing between them and getting out is money. And that's been shown to be a problem. My church has expunged people's records who have never been convicted of anything. There are people, there are Americans walking around right now who don't have a criminal record, but they have a record. They have an arrest record. It doesn't allow them to get a job, doesn't allow them to get an apartment. And so when you create these systems where you close every door, the outcome of that, where people can't be employed gainfully, the outcome of that is actually predictable. And we can do something about that. We can fix it, and that's what I'm committed to doing.
All right, Reverend Raphael Warnock, Senior Pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church. Thank you for joining us this morning. Really appreciate you joining us.
God bless you.
All right, we'll be right back right after this.